You're listening to the Veterinary Innovation Podcast.
You're listening to the Veterinary Innovation Podcast. My name is Sean Wilkie, and along with my awesome co host, we interview the innovators in this space every week. Ivan, go ahead and get us started, please.
Yeah, I'm in Zach, and I'm excited to introduce our friend Aoife Caulfield. And that is Aoife, which is very difficult to pronounce, but I love our Irish names and spellings. Aoife is the partnership and acquisition lead at Village Vets Ireland. She is a trained veterinary surgeon, graduated in 2010 with additional business qualifications and nearly a master's degree in strategy and innovation. Aoife is the founder of Just Cats Veterinary Clinic with Village Vets and transitioned through various roles at Village Vets, eventually becoming Chief Veterinary Officer before moving into M&A. Aoife, thank you for finding the time. Welcome to the show.
Well, thank you very much for having me.
So we met with Charles, who is your CEO, a couple years ago. We were meeting with him as Veterinary Integration Solutions. That was our startup on consulting and on actually what you do now, essentially consolidating the clinics, creating a strategy. What is innovative about Village Vets, and what is something that gets you excited every day?
Yeah, super. So I guess I don't want to be too much of a fangirl about my CEO, but I think Village Vets has always been a really interesting presence in Ireland. It's been a really innovative company to work for. So since Charles got involved in the business in the early 2000s, he's been innovating. So we've done a lot of the early consolidation. So before there was corporate ownership in Ireland in veterinary practices, Charles was the first to have a large group of multiples. He was the first to bring in an awful lot of kind of technologies and add-ons and health plans, things like that over the years into practice. And consequently, he organically grew the practice to 19 sites, which was no mean feat before getting some funding earlier this year. So I guess the future innovation for us is, as we go on this next part of our journey, what we want to do is introduce the partnership concept and I suppose make practice ownership more accessible for vets once more. For me and for my generation of vets, the challenge has been progression opportunities, I think, especially as corporatization of veterinary practice has happened, and it's happened at great speed in kind of as I became a mature vet, and the opportunity for ownership was more or less taken away in Ireland from young vets. We couldn't outbid the corporate practices coming in, and what happened was all of the practices have become centrally owned, or a great majority of them. So I guess what we want to do at Village Vets is we want to bring back the ability for young vets to find that progression and that autonomy and to go and be masters of their own destiny, set up their own practices, get involved, get skin in the game, and get the reward of being part of the ownership structure of a practice, and just, disperse that power and leadership back onto the ground and away from a head office somewhere. So I guess that's what we're doing, and that's what we're excited about.
It sounds pretty different, and we'll take your assertion that it's innovative as well, because it's definitely a different approach and it's really exciting. One question that I had from Ivan's intro, Aoife, was how long does it take to almost get a master's degree?
Well, I had decided to embark on a master's degree just before the opportunity to do M&A came up, so it was really bad timing on my part. Well, it was fortunate, and then it was bad timing. So I had embarked on a master's in September 2023, and then we got our funding and the M&A role came up in January. So I would have liked to have it done before I started this big role, I guess, in M&A and with this partnership concept. So I have 10 credits left of 90.
It's funny, CEOs have a way of taking schooling away from their disciples. I know a couple of people that have done that as well. That's an interesting story. I'm going to double back on Ivan's question that I think you tried to sneak away from, but what's super exciting for you when you get up every day and you're doing your role right now, this M&A role? What fires you up?
I think my favorite part is meeting potential partners and, meeting veterinary practitioners all over the country and hearing their stories. So I have a partner that works in our M&A department with me. And the first day I brought her out to meet somebody, she'd been with me for a couple of weeks doing all of the, financial modeling and, legal agreements and blah, blah, blah. And then she came out and she met somebody with me and she go, "Oh my God, I see why you do this now," because you get to go and sit down with practitioners that sometimes it's that they're struggling. They're maybe struggling with the administrative side of the business or HR, or just, finding it, the grind. They're on their own. They don't have support. Who do they ask? And then you kind of go, well, we're here and we would like to be that person for you. We would like to take away some of your pain, or maybe, so sometimes it's about pain. Sometimes it's about ambition. There are some of my favorites is the guys and ladies. I don't mean that to be gender specific, but when you meet guys that are absolutely, I want to build this practice, I want to grow it, but I don't have access to capital and I don't really have resources on the business side. And, could you do this with me? Could we go and double this practice, or, build a bigger hospital, or invest in more equipment and facilities, and you're kind of going, yeah, you know what, we can come on that journey with you and we can support that. So it's those stories that really light my fire, I have to say.
Yeah, so you're like a bit of a dream weaver, right? I hope these people make their dreams come true. It sounds like a pretty fun job. And I think recently you said that you guys received some funding. So then the next question I have for you guys is, what does Village Vets look like in 5 years?
Yeah, so I guess for us, without understanding the geography of Ireland, it could be difficult. But we started as an organic group that was Dublin based, and then the periphery. So our 19 sites were all within, I guess, an hour and 30 minutes of each other, around the capital city, so high density urban area. What we want to do then is have a presence across the island of Ireland. So we want to have a national presence, and we will start in urban areas because it's a bit more comfortable for us, urban areas and the peripheries to urban areas. But we want to have a national presence. We want to double our footprint and start to add a little bit more in terms of referral services than we've had in Ireland historically.
So that means 42 hospitals in the next 5 years. Is that right?
Something like that. Yeah, that's the principle. And really, it's about just getting our coverage across the country and supporting vets across the country. We're pretty dense in Dublin, so we don't need to do too much more up here.
I have a question. You mentioned about the decentralization, and then, when the acquirers and the consolidators come in, it's all centralized decision making. How do you support that? What is the structure of meetings or organization? Because certain decisions, it's really a battle between sort of, what do you centralize as a decision? Is it a drug formulary? Is it, vendors that we purchase from because there's certain discounting? And then what decisions are outsourced to the level of the clinic? And then what is the glue that holds it together? And you're moving in the same direction, so there's no misalignment between the 22 hospitals. That's a lot now. So is there a system that you follow? Is there, like, what does that look like in a practical manner? How do you guys control it as a one system, but yet with the decision making bottom up?
Yeah, so I guess for us, the key is really strong integration from a systems perspective. So we're all on the same PMS, we have the same procurement software, we're really highly integrated down to where you order your sundries from. It's all set, that's all uniform across the board. And that allows us to make decisions and with confidence that those simple things will get enacted across the board. And we centralize the things like the finance functions and the real basic HR functions, a lot of the softwares as well. So we've really good economies of scale by having the same softwares across and the same pieces of tech across all of the practices. So that's where the uniformity comes from. But then I suppose the individuality and the autonomy is what we want to give back. And I think where that comes in is in people leadership. It's on those softer parts of leadership and communication, and how you deliver your customer service, how you deliver your patient care, how your team responds to you. And I think in some other corporate settings, people are thrown into a building together, and that may or may not be successful and kind of expected to follow a pattern of work or an operating formula. But what we want by putting the partner back in the building is that you kind of go back to, I guess, I don't know if you guys saw this, 20, 30 years ago in veterinary, it was all about practice owner. It was the person who was there. They were the leader. You followed their style of leadership, the people that stayed with them, the clients that stayed with them, the team members that stayed with them. It was because they followed their leadership and their style of communication and all that kind of thing. And I think that's the piece that you can't make uniform. So, good leaders, it's rare that they're universally followed. You can get leaders that are well accepted broadly, but I think more typically day to day, you'll have a vet and a style of person and a style of leadership that appeals to some but not all. So we want to kind of allow that again and allow practices have their own individuality in terms of how the team forms, how the team works, how they communicate with each other. And that naturally then will keep those teams better bonded. That's the theory. And that's what we've seen in our practices that have strong leaders in them. A lot of those guys are now becoming partners with us, so they're buying into the practices that they've worked so long in. But it's the leader on the ground that keeps the team and keeps the clients. It's not the system and it's not the organization. Now, I know obviously there's organizational influences, but really the people on the ground are who keep each other and the clients there.
This episode is sponsored by Zomedica and the Vet Guardian Monitor. For those new to our podcast, we have Scott Ajaz, Senior Product Manager at Zomedica, with us to discuss the practical application of the Vet Guardian Monitor. Scott, can you give us a quick rundown of how Vet Guardian is applied in a real-world scenario?
Of course, Vet Guardian is designed for critical situations such as post-surgery or ICU care. It allows vets to continuously monitor vital signs without disturbing the patient. With our cloud app, they can also check in remotely anytime.
That sounds incredibly useful, especially for overnight stays.
Absolutely. Remote monitoring is essential. It lets vets keep an eye on patients in real time from anywhere. It enhances patient care while making the veterinary team's job easier. If you're interested, visit zomedica.com to schedule your demo today.
Thanks a lot for joining us, Scott.
The challenge that I bumped into, so we started with the model of acquisition, and then very quickly I realized that the difficulty is in the change of that team. And I actually completely gave up on this. For me, and probably I failed in delivering on something that I believed in, but when you're acquiring a hospital, there's a certain culture that is formed. Now, when you integrate that culture into something that you envision as an organization, they're different people and they can have absolutely stellar culture, but it's not the one that you have. So the integration of those two pieces, and it's just, they usually these kind of, words that people say, culture and leadership and all other things. But when it comes down to practical matters, when you go to change the pricing, we just went through exercise of changing the pricing in 4 hospitals that we have now. And it was a struggle because everybody seems to be on the same page. We're all there, but then there's opinions decentralized. So then they start looking at it as us versus them, the corporate versus the clinic. And then that, I think, where most consolidators fail, where there is actually no way to change the culture. So personally, when we started building them from the scratch and basically going greenfield, like you were going in multiple hospitals, I found that that is actually much easier formation of the organization, the same system, the same culture. And then even the changes that you do. I remember I talked to Charles before, and he said, we got the clinic. Essentially, we take the PIMS out, we take everything out and really put all the systems in. And I think that's the best way to do it. But the resistance to change that you meet through that is, I think, very difficult. So did you find that acquisition versus greenfield is vastly two different experiences like I did?
Yeah, so definitely greenfield is less challenging in term, you're oftentimes what we would do with greenfield is usually there's somebody that is looking for progression opportunity that goes into that lead vet role, and maybe the head nurse, maybe they've come from other village vets practices when they go to greenfield, and it's very easy. That makes a new culture very easy to form around a couple of key people, maybe a few new hires. It works really well from that perspective. So definitely greenfields are less of a challenge, but I think 2 things. In previous acquisitions where we haven't done partnership, as you mentioned, we've put in the systems and we've been very lucky to have teams there that were interested in change, and with good communication, they came with us on that journey. But I totally appreciate that's not always the case. And I guess that's where the partnership comes in. It's by aligning correctly with the partners is where we want to try and remove some of those roadblocks and those hurdles that you can get with founders or ex-owners of practices. So the idea being, if our partners, firstly, when we're identifying an acquisition, we make sure that we're looking to partner with people that are like-minded or that have the same ambition. So sometimes we meet people that maybe their practice isn't, as high clinical standard as we would like or whatever, but that's where they want to be. They want to come with us or be, on this journey with us. So we want to make sure that they're well aligned in getting there. Clinically and professionally, but then also that there's financial alignment. So in a partnership, there's obviously the same profit motivation, and without bringing it too much back to the money, it is really important. So when you think about things like procurement, there still will always be a couple of arguments. Vets want clinical freedom; they want to be able to make their own decision. But if you're both drawing earnings from the same profit line, theoretically, if one parasite treatment is there or thereabouts, you're not going to have too much of a row. So really, it's about aligning on the financial outcome and the motivations, picking the right partners that are interested in your ethos and interested in developing in that direction, and then supporting it. I know it's cliche, but just communication all the way is over communicate as much as possible, to try and bed that alignment in.
That sounds great with a whole lot of opportunities for partnerships. But if you have a limited pool of potential partners, does that mean you just start to build more greenfields if you can't find that alignment? Because it almost sounds like a story that we've heard over and over again. Like if people aren't putting the time into the partnerships up front, then maybe that's where a lot of the things fall apart.
Yeah, and I guess, look, not every practice we acquire is going to be a partnership. So we do have acquisitions where an owner is ready to retire. They're on an earnout, they're doing their few years and they're gone. Immediately when we come in, we're thinking about succession. And I think that's often where a lot of corporates fail, is that they don't think about succession. So they come in, and if this partner isn't well aligned and he's going to be a stick in the mud, or she's going to be just, a bit of a pain in the ass about what you're doing with their business going forward, that's problematic. So we start thinking about succession. We start thinking about who's the next natural leader. We start thinking about surrounding that person with people that can carry us in the right direction, rather than just letting, a person who maybe isn't with us drag the practice away. That's what we don't want to happen. So we've had good success in the past in doing that, in saying, look, no pressure on you. You don't love this. Let's find a way to accommodate that. But as a practice, we want to move this way. So please don't obstruct us. Look, we're small and we're agile as well. And I think that makes a difference compared to some that we have the ability to know what we're getting into in great detail, and to work very closely with the people that we're involved in. So that does make a huge difference. And we'll never be 50 plus practices in Ireland. It's not big enough. It's not a big country. So from that perspective, we'll always be close to our partners and our new businesses.
The interesting thing is that I understand the alignment, and quite a few consolidators did this in US as well. There's a lot of NVA, done a ton of joint ventures, and I understand the alignment of the management and the leadership team. But then there's, behind every doctor, there's 10, 12 nurses and technicians and assistants and everybody else. So do you have any instruments of incentivizing them? Because I understand someone who draws the profit from it. But then what about the rest of the team? What if they're not agreeing with the formula? What if they don't like this, new type of gloves that you're buying because you're getting 40% discount on them? What is there something that you do to actually get in alignment all the vertical across the clinic?
Yeah, I think it's kind of multifactorial. We have a really strong education piece. We do an awful lot of training. We have the biggest CPD program outside of university in Ireland, just with our own organization. And so we're strong on that. We've strong social links between clinics as well. And I think that those relationships, when things are broadly accepted, it helps when you have a strong network of people. So at the moment around Dublin, we have 300 people, and they're constantly at CPD events, at social events, they're meeting each other, and we know that most of what we do is broadly accepted. And as then in that community, it helps increase the level of acceptance. So I think that's one major lever that we have in gaining acceptance to what we're doing. There's a little part of it that, I would say, if you're not with us, then maybe we're not for you. That's a little part of it too. Like, our values are really important to us, and we believe in really the highest level of clinical care. We want vets to work to the top of their license in general practice. We don't want to inhibit people from doing interesting work, or from developing skills, or doing as much as they can in that setting. So from a clinical standards perspective, we want to push forward. From customer service is the other thing that's really important to us, making sure those clients are looked after. If that's not for you, then maybe we're not for you. And they're the basis. Those two pillars are the backbone of why we make every decision. And look, part of that is our leadership is mostly made up of veterinary professionals. And I think that that's really key as well. And that's where some other consolidators really miss out. Our CEO's a vet, I'm a vet, our COO is a nurse. Everybody has maybe a medical team or a chief veterinary officer, that kind of role, but all of us are vets and nurses, and we understand the clinic. We understand why people are there. We understand why team are there. We understand how hard it is to be in the clinic. And I think those things are what help us get acceptance of, the things that we do and the things we introduce, the drugs we introduce. We don't introduce them if we don't know they make sense.
Makes a ton of sense, and I think we could keep going for like 3.5 hours because it's a lot of fun today. But we got to wrap up because we ran out of time. So we got a couple of quick questions for you before we put a pin in this episode. First is a YouTube video, a TED Talk, a book, something you found inspiring along your journey, which has taken you to Canada. We didn't even get into that, but what would you like to recommend to our audience?
Well, I think I saw that written down when I was introduced to you guys, and I've heard it in your previous episodes. And actually, what inspired me the most lately was I went to the London Vet Show, and it wasn't particularly the talks, or any of the lectures that I went to, which were fabulous. Don't get me wrong, but in just networking and walking around and meeting people, I met some of the most inspiring people. I met practice owners. I met people with pieces of technology doing things with AI. I met just veterinary surgeons and nurses that were passionate and interested. And I think that sometimes, we can get stuck in books and podcasts and that kind of stuff. Getting out and talking to people is one of the most inspiring things you can do. So my recommendation is get out and talk and meet people you wouldn't normally talk to.
I love it.
That's awesome. And the last question that we ask, are there any guests in this industry that you would recommend for this podcast?
There's a lady I love, actually, and she's another Irish lady. Her name is Claire Hughes, and I haven't told her I would recommend her, so I hope she doesn't mind. But Claire has a great company. She's developed a super piece of AI tech around fecal testing for parasitology. She is just a really inspirational business leader. She's a pharmacist, actually, but has gotten into the veterinary space. She does a few different things, but she has a leadership team that's almost all female, which is another passion point of mine. And she's a strong woman with a wonderful business, so she'd be a great person to talk to in the veterinary space.
Thank you so much for listening to the Veterinary Innovation Podcast. If you want to hear about our new episodes, please follow us on any social media channel. Also, you can check out our website at veterinaryinnovationpodcast.com. See you next week.